Now let's begin. The bathroom door hung half open, and through it I could see my son's Spider-Man toothbrush still in the holder. It had been there for 3 days, untouched, while Ethan stayed at his grandfather's house. My wife Lorena had insisted. "Dad wants to spend time with him," she'd said, her voice flat in that way it got when she wouldn't hear arguments. "It'll be good for both of them." I'd agreed because I always agreed when it came to her father, Charles Hand. The man had been a district court judge for 30 years before retiring, and Lorena treated his word like scripture. Even now, 2 years after his retirement, people in town still called him Judge Hand with reverence or fear. I'd never been sure which. My name is Troy Blevins, and I used to be someone else entirely. 10 years ago, I worked for a private firm called Meridian Solutions. We didn't have business cards or websites. We existed in the gap between what was legal and what was necessary: corporate investigations, asset recovery, witness location. I was good at it. Too good, maybe. I could walk into a room and in 5 minutes know who was lying, who was scared, and who was dangerous. I could disappear a person's entire digital footprint or create a new identity from scratch. I could make people believe things that weren't true and doubt things that were. Then I met Lorena at a charity gala where I was working security, and she was everything I'd never had: stability, respectability, a life in the light instead of the shadows. She was a high school guidance counselor with a kind smile and connections to the right families in our mid-sized Ohio town of Ashford. When she got pregnant 6 months into our relationship, I saw it as a sign. Time to be someone real, someone normal. I took a job managing a sporting goods store. Learned about fishing reels and basketball shoes instead of surveillance equipment and background checks. I was Troy Blevins, retail manager, husband, father. The other person I'd been got locked away in a box I never planned to open. The front door opened, and Lorena walked in, her heels clicking on the hardwood. She didn't look at me, just set her purse on the counter and started sorting through mail. "I'm picking up Ethan," I said. She glanced up, her face impassive. "Dad said he'd bring him back tomorrow." "It's been 3 days, Lorena. He has school. 1 day won't hurt." She returned to the mail, her bob of dark hair falling forward to hide her expression. Something cold settled in my gut. Lorena had always deferred to her father, but lately it had gotten worse. Ever since Charles had lost his bid for state senate 6 months ago, he'd become more controlling, more present in our lives. He'd show up unannounced, criticize how we were raising Ethan, make demands disguised as suggestions. "I'm getting him," I said, grabbing my keys. "Troy." I was already out the door. The drive to Charles Hand's house took 20 minutes through Ashford's tree-lined streets. His place sat on 5 acres at the edge of town, a colonial-style mansion he'd bought with his wife's family money. She'd died 5 years ago, and he'd lived alone there since, though alone was relative. People still visited constantly, asking favors, seeking advice, treating him like he still sat behind a bench instead of brooding in a too-large house. His Mercedes was in the circular driveway. I parked behind it and knocked on the front door. No answer. I knocked again, harder. "Mr. Hand?" "It's Troy. I'm here for Ethan." Silence. Then, faintly from inside the house, a sound that made my blood freeze. A child crying. Not just crying. Sobbing with the kind of desperation that came from real fear. I tried the door. Locked. The crying got louder, and with it came a voice I recognized. Charles, saying something in a low, harsh tone I couldn't make out. Every instinct I'd buried for 10 years came roaring back. I moved to the side of the house, checked the windows. The third one was cracked open, a bathroom. I pushed it wider, pulled myself through. The house was dimly lit, heavy curtains blocking most of the afternoon sun. I moved through the hallway, following the sound. It was coming from upstairs. Charles's voice grew clearer. "Stop that crying. You're soft, just like your father. Someone needs to make you tough." I took the stairs 3 at a time. The door to the guest bedroom was closed. I opened it slowly. Charles stood in the middle of the room, his back to me, holding a leather belt in his right hand. He was a big man, 6'2" and broad-shouldered even at 65, his silver hair perfectly combed. "Where is he?" My voice came out level, controlled. Charles turned, his face showing surprise for just a moment before settling into something harder. "This is my home, Troy. You can't just—" "Where is Ethan?" He gestured toward the closet with the belt. "Learning a lesson about respect." I crossed the room in 2 strides and shoved past him. The closet door was closed. I opened it, and my heart shattered. Ethan was under the bed that was stored in the closet, curled in a ball, his small body shaking. His shirt was off. Even in the dim light, I could see the welts across his back and shoulders, red, angry lines that would leave bruises for weeks. "Hey, buddy," I said softly, crouching down. "It's Dad. Come here." He looked at me with eyes so full of fear and pain that I felt something inside me crack. "Don't make me go back to Grandpa's," he whispered. "Please, Dad. I'll be good. I promise I'll be good. You didn't do anything wrong." I reached for him carefully, letting him come to me at his own pace. He crawled out and pressed against my chest, his whole body trembling. I lifted him up, feeling every welt through his skin, and turned to face Charles. The old man stood there with the belt still in his hand, his expression caught between defiance and calculation. He broke one of my awards, the crystal gavel from the State Bar Association. Then he lied about it. He's 7 years old enough to learn consequences. Charles's jaw tightened. "This is how my father raised me, and I turned out fine." "You're too soft on him, Troy. Lorena knows it." "Why do you think she asked me to?" "Asked you to what?" The words came out cold. Charles hesitated, realizing his mistake. "To discipline him?" I continued. "She asked you to beat our son?" "Discipline," Charles repeated firmly. "There's a difference." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw what I should have seen years ago. This wasn't just an old man with outdated ideas about parenting. This was a bully who'd spent his entire life in positions of power, surrounded by people too afraid to stand up to him. He'd been a judge, used to his word being final, his authority absolute. And when he'd lost his Senate race, lost that next step up the ladder, he needed somewhere else to assert control. He'd chosen my son. "We're leaving," I said, heading for the door with Ethan in my arms. "You walk out that door, and there will be consequences," Charles called after me. "I have friends, Troy. Friends who can make your life very difficult." I stopped, looked back at him. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm telling you the way things are." He set the belt down on the dresser with deliberate care. "You married into this family. That comes with certain expectations, certain standards. If you can't meet them, if you're going to cause problems, then maybe you're not the right fit." The casual cruelty of it stunned me. He wasn't just talking about discipline. He was talking about removing me entirely, keeping Ethan, keeping Lorena, reshaping my son in his image. "Stay away from my family," I said. His smile was thin. "Your family? You really don't understand how this works, do you?" I carried Ethan to my car, my mind already working through possibilities, scenarios, moves and countermoves. At home, I brought him straight to his room. The late afternoon sun streamed through his window, highlighting every mark on his back. "I need to take some pictures, buddy. Can you be brave for me?" He nodded, his face streaked with dried tears. I used my phone, documenting every welt, every bruise. 23 total. I counted them twice to be sure. Then I helped him into a soft t-shirt and sat beside him on his bed. "Did Grandpa do this before?" Ethan nodded slowly. "Last time too. And he said if I told, he'd do worse. He said nobody would believe me anyway because he's a judge." He was a judge. Not anymore. He said he still has power, that he could take me away from you and Mom if I was bad. My hands clenched into fists. I forced them to relax. "That's not going to happen. I promise you, Ethan. He's never going to hurt you again." I heard the front door open downstairs. Lorena was home early. I went down to meet her, my phone already in my hand, pulling up the photos. She was in the kitchen, pouring herself wine. She looked tired, her makeup slightly smudged. "You got Ethan," she said without turning around. "Look at these." I held out my phone. She glanced at the screen, and for a moment I saw something flicker across her face. Shock, maybe, or guilt. Then it smoothed away into something harder. Dad called it old-school discipline. It's not that bad. The words hit me like a physical blow. Not that bad. Lorena, look at them. He broke a very expensive award and then lied about it. There have to be consequences. You knew. My voice sounded distant even to my own ears. You knew your father was beating our son, and you let it happen. She took a long drink of wine. My father raised me just fine. I turned out okay. And suddenly I understood. This wasn't about Ethan. This was about Lorena's own childhood, about the things she'd normalized, the pain she'd buried so deep she could watch her own son suffer the same way. Charles' hand had broken her years ago, and now she was standing aside while he broke Ethan. "I'm calling the police," I said. Her head snapped up. "Troy, don't. Please. This is a family matter. We can handle it privately. 23 welts on a 7-year-old's back is not a family matter. My father was a district court judge. He has friends in the police department, the prosecutor's office, everywhere. If you do this, if you try to cause problems, he'll—" She stopped, but I could fill in the rest. "He'll what? Destroy me?" She didn't answer, which was answer enough. I dialed 911. Lorena watched me with something like pity in her eyes, as if I were a child who didn't understand the rules of the world. The operator answered, and I reported the abuse, gave our address, said I had photographic evidence. They arrived 18 minutes later. 2 officers, one older, maybe mid-50s, with a thick mustache and a wedding ring, and one younger, late 20s, still eager. The older one I recognized from around town. Officer Rodney McFarland. He'd been at Charles Hand's retirement party, I remembered. They'd posed for photos together. "Evening, Mr. Blevins," McFarland said, his voice professionally neutral. "We got a call about child abuse. My son is upstairs. His grandfather beat him with a belt. I have photos. Mind if we take a look?" I led them up to Ethan's room. He was lying on his side, his eyes closed, but I could tell he wasn't really sleeping. I showed them the photos on my phone, then carefully lifted Ethan's shirt to show the welts in person. The younger officer's face tightened with anger. McFarland's remained neutral, almost bored. "And who did this?" McFarland asked. "Charles Hand. My father-in-law. My son was staying at his house the past 3 days." Something passed between the 2 officers, a look I recognized from my old life. A silent conversation. "We'll need to take your phone as evidence," McFarland said. "And we'll need you to come down to the station to give a statement." "Of course. Whatever you need." "Actually," McFarland continued, pulling out handcuffs, "we're going to need you to come with us now." The younger officer looked surprised. "Rod, I don't think." "Troy Blevins, you're under arrest for assault and battery, making false claims to law enforcement, and attempted extortion." The world tilted. "What? Judge Hand called us 20 minutes ago. Said you broke into his home, assaulted him, and are trying to blackmail him with false abuse allegations." McFarland's face was stone. He had photos too. Bruises on his arms from where you grabbed him. A broken window where you forced entry. "That's insane. I have evidence. We'll sort it all out at the station. Turn around, please." The younger officer, his name tag said Griffin, spoke up. "Shouldn't we at least look at his photos first? The kid's injuries are probably from him," McFarland said flatly. Judge Hand suggested the father might be the real abuser, trying to frame him. "It's not uncommon in custody disputes." "There's no custody dispute," I said, but I could hear how weak it sounded. Lorena appeared in the doorway. She looked at me, at the handcuffs, and her face showed no surprise at all. She'd known this would happen. Charles had probably called her right after I left his house, told her the plan. "Troy has been under a lot of stress lately," she said quietly. "He's been different. Aggressive. Lorena, tell them the truth." She looked away. "I think it's best if you go with them, Troy. Clear this up." McFarland grabbed my arm, and every instinct screamed at me to fight, to run, to do something. But Ethan was watching from his bed, his eyes wide with fresh fear, and I couldn't let him see his father dragged away in violence. So I let them cuff me. Let them walk me down the stairs and out to their cruiser while neighbors peered through curtains. Let them push me into the back seat like a criminal. As we pulled away, I caught a glimpse of Lorena in the doorway, her phone already to her ear, probably calling her father, probably telling him it was done. But what none of them knew, not Lorena, not Charles, not the corrupt cop sitting in the front seat, was that Troy Blevins, retail manager, wasn't the only person I knew how to be. And the person I used to be didn't lose. The holding cell smelled like disinfectant and desperation. They'd processed me through booking, fingerprints, photos, personal effects collected in a plastic bag. McFarland had done it all with mechanical efficiency, his face showing nothing. Now I sat on a metal bench, my mind racing through possibilities. This wasn't just Charles Hand being vindictive. This was planned, coordinated. He'd probably started setting up his counter-narrative the moment I'd left his house with Ethan. Injured himself to create evidence, called his police connections, coached Lorena on exactly what to say. The man had been a judge for 3 decades. He knew how the system worked, how to manipulate it. He'd probably done this before, used his position to make problems disappear, protect himself and his allies, crush anyone who threatened him. But he'd made one critical mistake. He'd assumed I was nobody, just his daughter's husband, some retail worker with no connections, no resources, no way to fight back. The cell door opened. A public defender walked in, a tired-looking woman in her 40s with papers under her arm. "Mr. Blevins? I'm Patricia Warren. I've been assigned to your case. When do I get arraigned?" "Tomorrow morning. But we need to talk about your situation." She sat beside me, opening a folder. "The charges are serious. Breaking and entering, assault, filing a false report, attempted extortion. The prosecutor is pushing for no bail." "On what grounds?" "Flight risk. The complainant, Judge Charles Hand, claims you've made threats, that you're dangerous." She glanced at her notes. "He's also filed for an emergency protective order. If you make bail, you can't go within 500 feet of him or your home." "My home? My son is there." "Your wife supports the protective order. She's claiming you've been unstable, that she's afraid for her and your son's safety." I laughed, a harsh sound in the small space. "My son's back is covered in welts from where her father beat him with a belt." "Do you have evidence?" "Photos on my phone, which they confiscated." Warren made a note. "I'll request access to the phone in discovery. But you should know, Judge Hand has a different version. He says you attacked him when he tried to discipline your son appropriately, that you injured your son yourself and are trying to frame him. And people believe that." She gave me a sympathetic look. "Judge Hand is well respected in this town. He has relationships with the prosecutor, most of the police department, half the lawyers at the courthouse." "You're—" She hesitated. "Nobody," I finished. I was going to say at a disadvantage. After she left, I lay on the bench and stared at the ceiling. In my old life, I would have had a dozen ways out of this. Meridian Solutions had connections everywhere. Lawyers, investigators, people who owed favors. But I'd left all that behind. Cut every tie, burned every bridge. I'd wanted to be normal so badly that I'd made myself vulnerable. Charles Hand had found that vulnerability and driven a knife into it. But he didn't know everything. He didn't know about the skills I'd retained, the habits that never really went away. He didn't know that in my job at Meridian, I'd specialized in unraveling exactly this kind of corruption, powerful people using systems to protect themselves and hurt others. He didn't know I'd already started gathering evidence the moment I'd walked into his house. The arraignment was a formality. Judge Preston Swan, a man about 10 years younger than Charles, but clearly influenced by him, set bail at $50,000. I didn't have that kind of money. Lorena certainly wasn't going to post it. So I went back to county jail to await trial. 3 days passed. On the 4th, I got a visitor. Jeffrey McLean walked into the visiting room like he owned it, which, given his reputation, he might have. He was my age, early 40s, with the kind of expensive suit that spoke of serious money. His law firm handled major cases across 3 states. "Troy Blevins," he said, sitting across from me. Or should I say Troy Morrison? My old name. The one I'd legally changed when I left Meridian. "How did you?" "I did my homework. Made some calls. Talked to some people who used to work with you." He leaned back in his chair. "Turns out, you were very good at your job. Good enough that some people were disappointed when you disappeared. That life is over." "Is it?" He pulled out a tablet, showed me a news article. Charles Hand announces bid for county commissioner. Expected to win easily given his reputation and connections. He swiped to another article. Local police chief Rodney McFarland endorses Hand's candidacy. The two have a long working relationship. McFarland, the cop who'd arrested me. Not just a cop, the police chief. "They're building something," McLean continued. "Hand wants back in power. He's got law enforcement, the prosecutor's office, half the business community in his pocket. And you threaten that. By reporting child abuse. By standing up to him. By showing you won't fall in line." He put the tablet away. "People like Hand can't tolerate that. He needs everyone to know he's untouchable. Why are you here?" "Because I've been watching Charles Hand for 2 years. Building a case. And you just handed me the perfect opening." He smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "I'm going to get you out of here, Troy. Then you're going to help me destroy him." I studied him. "What's your angle?" "Personal. Hand was the judge who presided over my sister's divorce 3 years ago. Her husband was abusive, documented police reports, hospital visits, witnesses. Hand ruled in the husband's favor anyway. Gave him full custody of their daughter." McLean's voice stayed level. but I could hear the anger underneath. My niece killed herself 6 months later. Jumped off a bridge. She was 9 years old. The words hung in the air between us. I've spent 2 years investigating Hand, McLean continued. His connections, his corruption, the favors he's traded. But it's all circumstantial. What you have, those photos, your testimony, your son's testimony, that's direct evidence of abuse from someone with his credibility. It's the crack in his armor I've been looking for. They confiscated my phone. I'm filing a motion to have it released as defense evidence. Judge Swan will fight it, but I'll win eventually. Meanwhile, I need you to tell me everything. Every detail about what happened, about your father-in-law, about your wife's involvement. Over the next hour, I told him, not just about finding Ethan, but about the years leading up to it. Charles's increasing control, Lorena's deference, the subtle warning signs I'd ignored. McLean took notes, asked sharp questions, pushed for specifics. Your wife is complicit, he said finally. She helped set you up. I know. That matters. We can use it. He closed his notebook. I'll have you out on bail by tomorrow. When you get out, don't go home. I have a secure apartment you can use. And don't try to contact your son, not yet. They're watching for that. How long until trial? Months. But we're not waiting for trial. He stood up. We're going to dismantle Charles' Hand piece by piece. We're going to expose every dirty deal, every favor, every abuse of power. And by the time we're done, he won't just lose his case against you. He'll lose everything. Why are you doing this? Really? McLean's expression hardened. Because men like Hand think they're gods. They think their power makes them untouchable. They think they can hurt children and walk away clean. He headed for the door, then paused. I'm doing this because my niece deserved better. And so does your son. After he left, I sat in my cell and thought about what came next. McLean was offering me a way out, a chance to fight back through legal channels. It was the smart play, the safe play. But I knew the system. I'd seen how it could be manipulated, how people like Charles Hand could drag things out for years, make evidence disappear, intimidate witnesses. Even with McLean's help, there were no guarantees, which meant I needed insurance. I needed to start working my own angles, building my own case against Charles Hand. Not just legal evidence, leverage. The kind of information that powerful people would pay to keep buried. The kind I used to specialize in finding. McLean got me out the next day. The bail was covered by his firm, a loan against future settlement. He explained, though we both knew I'd never be able to pay it back through legal means. Lorena had already filed for divorce and sole custody. The emergency protective order meant I couldn't go within 500 feet of my home or Charles Hand. The apartment McLean set me up in was a one-bedroom in a nondescript building across town. Clean, furnished, anonymous. He'd also provided me with a laptop, a burner phone, and access to investigative databases through his firm. Don't do anything that could jeopardize the case, he warned before leaving. No contact with Hand, your wife, or your son. Let me handle the legal side. I agreed because I needed him to trust me. But the moment he left, I started working. First, I needed to understand the full scope of Charles Hand's network. I began with public records, court cases he'd presided over, looking for patterns. Defendants who should have been convicted but weren't. Plaintiffs who should have won but lost. Civil cases where the rulings didn't match the evidence. It took 3 days, but patterns emerged. Hand had consistently ruled in favor of certain lawyers, certain business owners, certain political figures. He'd dismissed abuse allegations against a council member's son. He'd ruled against the city in a zoning dispute that benefited a real estate developer. He'd sealed records in cases that involved prominent families. Each decision, taken alone, could be explained. Together, they painted a picture of systematic corruption. I cross-referenced those cases with campaign contributions to Hand's failed Senate run. The same names appeared: the real estate developer, the council member, the business owners. They'd all donated. Some had held fundraisers. But contributions weren't crimes. I needed more. I thought about Rodney McFarland, the police chief. He'd arrested me without even considering my evidence, following Hand's narrative without question. That suggested a deeper relationship than just professional respect. I started digging into McFarland's background. That's when I found it. 10 years ago, McFarland had been a sergeant accused of using excessive force during an arrest. The complainant had been a young black man named Damon Zimmerman, who claimed McFarland had beaten him during a traffic stop, then planted drugs in his car. The case should have been explosive. There were witnesses, medical records showing Zimmerman's injuries, inconsistencies in McFarland's report. Judge Charles Hand had presided over the internal police review. He'd ruled the complaints unfounded, cleared McFarland of all charges. 6 months later, McFarland was promoted to lieutenant. 3 years after that, captain. Now he was chief. Zimmerman had served 2 years for the planted drugs. He'd been released early for good behavior, but his record had made it impossible to get decent work. Last known address was a homeless shelter downtown. I found him there on a Wednesday afternoon. Damon Zimmerman was 32, but looked older, his face lined with hardship. He was suspicious when I approached, but he agreed to talk when I mentioned Charles Hand's name. We sat in a coffee shop 3 blocks from the shelter. I bought him lunch and listened to his story. I was 22, he said. No record, no history of trouble. McFarland pulled me over for a broken taillight. Asked to search my car, I said no. He dragged me out, beat me on the side of the road. Next thing I know, he's pulling a bag of cocaine out from under my seat. You claimed it was planted. Because it was. I never used drugs, never sold them. But who's going to believe me over a cop? He took a bite of his sandwich. My lawyer said we had a good case. Witnesses saw the beating. My injuries were documented. Then Judge Hand took over the review. What happened? He dismissed everything. Said the witnesses weren't credible. Said my injuries could have been from resisting arrest. Said McFarland's word was good enough. Zimmerman's hands clenched around his coffee cup. I tried to appeal, but by then I'd been convicted on the drug charge. No one wanted to touch it. Would you be willing to testify about what happened? He laughed bitterly. Who'd believe me now? I've got a drug conviction. I've been homeless for 3 years. Meanwhile, McFarland is running the police department and Hand is running for county commissioner. What if I told you I have evidence that Hand is corrupt, that I'm building a case against him? Zimmerman studied me. Why would you do that? Because he hurt my son, and he's trying to take my son away from me permanently. Something shifted in his expression. What do you need? Over the next week, I tracked down 3 more people with similar stories. Cases where Charles Hand had ruled in ways that protected the powerful and punished the vulnerable. A domestic violence victim whose restraining order Hand had denied. A worker injured on a construction site whose lawsuit Hand had dismissed. A teenage girl whose sexual assault case Hand had thrown out on technical grounds. Each one had been silenced, intimidated, or simply given up fighting a system that was rigged against them. Each one had assumed they were alone. I showed them they weren't. Meanwhile, McLean was making progress on the legal front. He'd gotten my phone released as evidence, and the photos of Ethan's injuries were now part of the official record. He'd also found inconsistencies in McFarland's arrest report, times that didn't match up, witnesses who were never interviewed, evidence that wasn't properly documented. We're building a solid defense, he told me during one of our meetings. But I'm worried about the judge. Swan is Hand's protege. He's going to rule against us at every turn. Can we get a different judge? I'm trying. Filed a motion for recusal based on Swan's relationship with Hand. But it's a long shot. I nodded, but my mind was elsewhere. Because I'd found something else in my research, something that could change everything. Charles Hand owned a hunting cabin in the woods 50 miles outside Ashford. According to property records, he bought it 15 years ago through an LLC. The LLC had been dissolved 7 years ago, but the property had never been transferred. Technically, it was in legal limbo. More interesting, cell phone records, which I shouldn't have had access to but did, thanks to skills from my old life, showed that Hand had been at the cabin the day before my arrest. He'd stayed there for 3 hours. I decided to take a drive. The cabin was exactly what I expected, rustic, isolated, surrounded by dense forest. No neighbors for miles. I parked down the road and approached on foot, checking for security cameras. There were none visible, which fit Hand's profile. He was arrogant enough to think no one would dare investigate him. The front door was locked, but the skills from Meridian Solutions came back easily. Inside, the cabin was furnished simply. A main room with a fireplace, a small kitchen, 2 bedrooms. Everything was clean, well-maintained. Someone came here regularly. I searched methodically, looking for anything that might be useful. In the master bedroom closet, behind a stack of old clothes, I found a lockbox. It took me 5 minutes to crack it. Inside were documents. Lots of them. Contracts, financial statements, letters, all involving Charles Hand and various business associates. There were also photographs. Not the kind you'd show at family gatherings. I photographed everything with my burner phone, then carefully put it all back exactly as I'd found it. Let Hand think his secrets were still secret. Back at the apartment, I went through the photos. The documents detailed a network of corruption that went deeper than I'd imagined. Hand had been accepting bribes for favorable rulings for years. Cash payments, property deals, campaign contributions funneled through shell companies. The amounts were staggering. Hundreds of thousands of dollars over his career. The photographs were worse. They showed Hand with various women in compromising positions. Some of the women looked young. Too young. I cross-referenced faces against missing persons reports, social media, yearbook photos from the local high school. 3 of them had been students at Ashford High when the photos were taken. One of them had been in Lorena's guidance counseling group. I sat back, feeling sick. This wasn't just corruption. This was predatory behavior, possibly criminal, involving minors. And if Lorena had been involved in her guidance counseling role, if she'd known and looked away, she was complicit in more than just child abuse. This was the leverage I needed. Not just to defend myself in court, but to destroy Charles' Hand completely. But I had to be careful. Release this information wrong and it could backfire, be dismissed as fake, get me arrested for more crimes. I needed to control the narrative, choose the perfect moment to strike. I called Jeffrey McLean. I need to show you something, I said. And then we need to talk about changing our strategy. McLean came to the apartment that night. I showed him everything. The documents, the photographs, the evidence of corruption and abuse going back years. His face got harder with each new revelation. Where did you get this? He asked finally. Do you really want to know? Probably not. He was quiet for a moment. This is explosive, but also dangerous. If we present this wrong, if we can't verify it, it could destroy our credibility. I can verify it. I have sources people Hand has hurt. They'll testify once they know they're not alone. And the photographs of the students? I've identified 2 of them. Both are over 18 now. If they're willing to talk. McLean nodded slowly. We need to approach them carefully. Trauma-informed. Make sure they understand they're not on trial. I can do that. It's what I used to do. He gave me a sharp look. Who were you really, Troy? Before you became a retail manager? Someone who found people's secrets and decided what to do with them. I met his gaze. Someone who was very good at it. And you're willing to become that person again? I never stopped being him. I just pretended for a while. McLean stood up, paced the room. If we do this, if we go after Hand with everything, we can't hold anything back. It's scorched earth. He'll fight back with everything he has. He'll try to destroy you, me, anyone associated with this. He's already trying to destroy me. The difference is now I'm going to fight back. All right. McLean's expression was grim. Then let's bury him. Over the next 3 weeks, we built our case. McLean worked the legal angles while I worked everything else. I contacted the 2 women from the photographs, approached them carefully, explained what I had and what I wanted to do with it. One refused to get involved. The trauma is still too raw even years later. The other, a woman named Alicia Avery, agreed to testify. She'd been 17 when Hand had mentored her through his connection to the high school. The relationship had been inappropriate, possibly illegal, definitely abusive. He made me feel like I had no choice, she told me during our first meeting. He was this important judge, this respected man. Who was going to believe me? I believe you, I said. And I'm going to make sure everyone else does too. I found more victims, not of sexual abuse, but of Hand's corruption and cruelty. Each one added another layer to the picture of a man who'd spent decades using his power to hurt people and protect himself. Meanwhile, my trial date approached. McLean had managed to get Judge Swan recused based on his relationship with Hand, and the case had been assigned to a visiting judge from another county, someone who didn't owe Hand any favors. It was a small victory, but significant. Then, 2 days before trial, something unexpected happened. My son Ethan ran away. He'd been staying with Lorena at our house under the protective order. But apparently he'd snuck out in the middle of the night and made his way across town to McLean's office. The security guard found him there at 6 a.m., sitting outside the locked door. He says he wants to talk to his father. The guard told me over the phone. Says he has things to tell the court. McLean and I picked him up together. Ethan looked thin, scared, but determined. The moment he saw me, he ran into my arms. I want to live with you, he said. Not Mom. Not Grandpa. You. I'm working on that, buddy. I know what Grandpa did. I know he lied about you. His voice was small but firm. I want to tell the judge. I want to tell everyone. McLean crouched down to Ethan's level. That's very brave. But you understand what that means? Your grandfather and your mother, they'll hear everything you say. It might be scary. Scarier than going back. Ethan looked at him with eyes too old for 7. Grandpa said if I told anyone the truth, he'd make sure I never saw Dad again. But I don't care. I'm not lying for him anymore. I looked at McLean. He nodded. Okay, I told Ethan. Then we'll make sure everyone hears the truth. That night, I made a decision. Waiting for the trial, playing by the rules, hoping the system would work, it wasn't enough. Even with all our evidence, there was still a chance Hand could manipulate the outcome, intimidate witnesses, find some way to win. Men like him always had one more move, one more connection. I needed to make sure he had nowhere to run. I spent the next 24 hours working nonstop. I compiled everything, the documents from the cabin, the witness statements, the photographs, the financial records, Alicia Avery's testimony. I created a comprehensive dossier that laid out Charles Hand's corruption in devastating detail. Then I sent copies to everyone who mattered. The county prosecutor, the state attorney general, the FBI field office in Cleveland, the local newspaper, 3 television stations, and, just for good measure, every member of the county commissioner board that Hand was planning to run for. I didn't sign my name. Didn't need to. The evidence spoke for itself. By the time the trial started the next morning, the story was already breaking. News vans surrounded the courthouse. Reporters shouted questions at anyone entering or leaving. The prosecutor looked pale and sweating. He'd probably just realized his office had been protecting a criminal for years. Charles Hand arrived with his lawyers, still projecting confidence. But I could see the cracks in his armor. His smile was too tight. His eyes kept darting to the news crews. Inside the courtroom, McLean leaned over to me. That was you. I have no idea what you're talking about. Troy, I made sure he can't run. Can't hide. Can't make this go away quietly. I watched Hand take his seat across the aisle. Now we finish it. The trial lasted 3 days, but everyone knew it was over before it really began. The visiting judge, a stern woman named Joan Murray, made it clear she had no patience for games. She'd seen the news reports, reviewed the evidence that had been leaked, and was determined to get to the truth. Ethan testified first. He was scared, his voice shaking, but he told the truth. Described the beatings, the threats, the fear. Described how his mother had known and done nothing. Described how his grandfather had told him that powerful people didn't face consequences. Lorena sat in the gallery, her face blank. She didn't look at Ethan once during his testimony. Then came the medical examiner who'd reviewed my photos. The child psychologist who'd evaluated Ethan. The expert on child abuse patterns. Each one confirmed what anyone with eyes could see. My son had been systematically abused, and Charles Hand was responsible. Hand's lawyers tried to maintain the narrative that I'd fabricated everything, but it fell apart under scrutiny. The visiting judge saw through every attempt to muddy the waters. On the second day, Alicia Avery testified. She described her relationship with Hand when she was 17, the inappropriate advances, the abuse of his position. 2 other women came forward during breaks, adding their stories to hers. By the 3rd day, Hand's lawyers were in damage control mode. The criminal charges against me were quietly dropped. The prosecutor announced an investigation into Hand's conduct during his time on the bench. The FBI confirmed they were looking into the corruption allegations. But I wasn't satisfied with just legal victories. On the final day of trial, as Judge Murray was preparing to rule on custody, I stood up. Your Honor, I'd like to make a statement. McLean grabbed my arm. Troy, don't. I pulled away and faced Charles Hand directly. You tried to destroy me because I wouldn't let you hurt my son, I said. You used your power, your connections, your reputation. You made people believe I was the monster while you were the one leaving welts on a child's back. Hand's face reddened. You have no right. I have every right. You made this personal. I pulled out my phone, displayed a photo on the screen. It showed Hand at his hunting cabin with one of the young women from the pictures. You thought you were untouchable. You thought no one would dare stand up to you. You were wrong. His lawyers shouted objections. Judge Murray banged her gavel. But I'd made my point. This ends now, I said to Hand. Your career, your reputation, your freedom, it's all over. And you did it to yourself. Judge Murray ruled in my favor on everything. Full custody of Ethan, a restraining order against both Charles Hand and Lorena, and a referral to Child Protective Services regarding Lorena's neglect. The criminal charges against me were formally dismissed with prejudice. But the real victory came 2 weeks later when the state attorney general filed charges against Charles Hand for abuse of office, accepting bribes, and multiple counts of sexual misconduct with minors. Rodney McFarland was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. 3 other officials in Hand's network resigned before they could be implicated. The house of cards collapsed exactly the way I'd planned. I picked Ethan up from the temporary foster placement where he'd been staying during the final legal proceedings. He was quiet on the drive to our new apartment, a bigger place McLean had helped me find, in a better neighborhood, far from any memories of Lorena or her father. "Is it really over?" Ethan asked as we pulled into the parking lot. "The legal part, mostly. Your grandfather is going to prison. Your mother." I paused, choosing words carefully. "She's going to have to face what she did. What she let happen. I don't want to see her." "You don't have to. Not until you're ready. Maybe not ever." We walked up to the apartment together. Inside, I'd already set up his room. New bed, new toys, posters of his favorite superheroes. A fresh start. That night, after Ethan fell asleep, I sat on the couch with a beer and thought about everything that had happened. About the person I'd had to become again to protect my son. About the lives I'd upended, the secrets I'd exposed, the destruction I'd caused. I didn't feel guilty. Men like Charles Hand existed because people let them. Because victims stayed silent out of fear. Because the system protected the powerful and ignored the vulnerable. Someone had to break that cycle. Someone had to show that power and connections and reputation weren't enough to escape consequences. This time, that someone was me. My phone buzzed with a text from McLean. Hand pled guilty to 3 counts. 15 to 20 years. McFarland indicted. "Your wife's lawyer called. She wants to surrender parental rights voluntarily rather than face a custody trial." I typed back, "Accept the surrender." She made her choice. Another text came in, this one from an unknown number. I almost deleted it, then saw the message. "Thank you. You gave me my voice back. Alicia." I stared at it for a long time. Then I forwarded it to Damon Zimmerman and the other people I'd interviewed during my investigation. People who'd been hurt by Hand and thought they had to carry that pain alone. Maybe that was the real victory. Not the legal outcome, not Hand's arrest, not even getting my son back. It was showing people that they could fight back. That bullies and abusers and corrupt officials weren't invincible. That sometimes the good guys win. 3 months later, I stood in family court as Judge Murray signed the final custody order. Ethan was officially and permanently mine. Lorena had relinquished all parental rights without contest, probably under advice from her lawyer that fighting would only expose her complicity further. After the hearing, McLean pulled me aside in the courthouse hallway. "What are you going to do now?" he asked. "Be a father. That's all I ever wanted. You're wasted in retail, you know, with your skills. I'm done with that life, Jeffrey. I used what I had to use to protect my son, but I'm not going back to being an investigator." "Fair enough." He shook my hand. "But if you ever change your mind, I could use someone like you. We're getting a lot of cases similar to this one. Powerful people abusing their positions. Victims who need someone willing to dig deep and fight dirty." "You mean legally fight dirty?" He grinned. "Of course. Strictly within the bounds of the law." I laughed. We both knew that was flexible. A few weeks later, I got a call from Charles Hand's attorney. Hand wanted to speak with me before his sentencing. I almost refused, then thought about it. Maybe there was value in hearing whatever final words he wanted to say. They brought him into the meeting room at the county jail wearing an orange jumpsuit, his hands cuffed. The powerful judge was gone. In his place was an old man facing the end of his life in prison. "You destroyed me," he said without preamble. "No, you destroyed yourself. I just made sure everyone saw what you really were. I was doing what I thought was right. Ethan needed discipline. You beat a 7-year-old until his back was covered in welts. Don't pretend that was about discipline." Hand's jaw tightened. "And the rest? The things you leaked? Some of those relationships were consensual. Some of those women were 17. Students. Under your mentorship." I leaned forward. "You groomed them, Charles. Just like you tried to groom Ethan into accepting abuse as normal." He was quiet for a long moment. "Then, what about Lorena? Your wife. You ruined her life too. She chose you over our son. That was her decision. She's my daughter. I raised her. You broke her. And she was about to let you break my son the same way. I stood up. I'm done here. Wait. His voice cracked. Does he ever ask about me? I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not the powerful judge or the corrupt politician, but a pathetic old man who'd thrown away everything for the illusion of control. No, I said. He doesn't. You're already forgotten. I walked out without looking back. 6 months after everything ended, Ethan and I settled into our new life. He was in therapy, working through the trauma. Some days were hard. Nightmares, anxiety, moments of fear that it might all happen again. But he was healing. Slowly, steadily, he was becoming just a kid again. I'd taken a new job managing an outdoor recreation center. It paid less than the sporting goods store, but the hours were better and I could bring Ethan to work sometimes. We'd go fishing in the lake out back, or he'd play on the climbing walls while I handled paperwork. One Saturday afternoon, we were out on the water when Ethan asked, Dad, did you used to do something else? Before the store. Why do you ask? Because when all that stuff happened with Grandpa, you knew exactly what to do. Like you'd done it before. Smart kid. I used to help people who were in trouble. Find information they needed. Solve problems. Like a detective? Sort of. But not with the police. Private. He thought about that, his fishing line dangling in the water. Did you like it? Parts of it. But I like this better. I gestured at the lake, at him. Being here with you. Even though we had to fight Grandpa. Even though everything got scary. Especially because of that. Because now I know what matters. I reeled in my line, cast it out again. I used to think I wanted a normal life. A regular job, a quiet family. But normal isn't what matters. What matters is protecting the people you love. Fighting for what's right. Being brave when you need to be. Ethan was quiet for a while. Then, you were really brave, Dad. So were you. You told the truth even when you were scared. That's the bravest thing anyone can do. We fished until sunset, talking about nothing important. School, friends, the new video game he wanted. Normal things. The kind of conversations I'd thought I'd lost forever when the police showed up at my door 6 months ago. But we got them back. Not because the system worked. The system had been rigged against us. We got them back because I'd refused to let Charles' hand win. Because I'd used every skill, every connection, every piece of leverage I had to protect my son. Some people might say what I did was wrong. That I should have trusted the legal system, waited for justice through proper channels. But I'd seen too much corruption, too much abuse of power, to believe that justice always comes through proper channels. Sometimes you have to make your own justice. Sometimes you have to become the thing you left behind to save what matters most. And I'd do it all again without hesitation. That night, after Ethan went to bed, I sat on the balcony and looked out at the city lights. My phone buzzed, a message from Jeffrey McLean, another case. Father with custody claiming mother is abusing the kids. Judge won't listen because the father has a record. Sound familiar? I stared at the message for a long time. I told McLean I was done with that life. Done being an investigator, done digging into people's secrets, done fighting the kind of battles that required you to get your hands dirty. But I also knew what it felt like to have a system stacked against you. To watch your child suffer and feel powerless to stop it. To know that somewhere, someone with power was hurting people and getting away with it because no one would stand up to them. I typed back, send me the details. Because maybe I wasn't done after all. Maybe this was who I'd always been meant to be. Not a retail manager pretending to be normal, but someone who fought for people who couldn't fight for themselves. Someone who understood both the system and how to work around it. Someone willing to cross lines that others wouldn't. Jeffrey McLean had called it scorched earth. Maybe that's what justice sometimes required. Burning down the corruption completely so something better could grow in its place. I looked back through the sliding door at Ethan's closed bedroom door. Everything I'd done, every rule I'd bent, every secret I'd exposed, it was all for him. To give him a childhood free from fear, a future where he didn't have to bow to bullies. And if other kids needed that same protection, if other parents needed someone to fight when the system failed them, then maybe I had an obligation to help. Not as Troy Blevins, retail manager. As who I really was underneath. The phone buzzed again. This time it was Alicia Avery. I'm testifying before the State Judicial Board next week about Hand and other judges I've learned about. Thank you for giving me the courage to speak up. You changed my life. Then Damon Zimmerman. Got a job interview tomorrow. Real job, decent pay. First one in 3 years. Turns out being vindicated helps. Couldn't have happened without you. More messages came in. A woman whose domestic violence case hand had dismissed, thanking me for exposing him. A man whose custody battle hand had manipulated, telling me he was filing for a new hearing. Person after person whose lives had been damaged by corruption and abuse of power, now finding their voices, fighting back. This was what winning looked like. Not just my personal victory, but a ripple effect of people standing up, demanding better, refusing to stay silent. And I'd helped start it. I pulled up McLean's message again, read the details of the new case. A father named Doug Winters whose ex-wife was allegedly abusing their 2 kids, but the judge, another one of Hans' old buddies, refused to hear evidence because Winters had a DUI from 5 years ago. The same pattern of powerful people protecting each other, vulnerable people getting hurt. I started making notes. Research I'd need to do. People I'd need to talk to. Systems I'd need to understand and exploit. I told McLean I was done with this life. But maybe you never really leave some things behind. Maybe they're part of who you are, and trying to pretend otherwise just means you're lying to yourself. I wasn't Troy Morrison anymore, the investigator who worked in shadows and moral gray areas. But I wasn't just Troy Blevins, the retail manager, either. I was something new. A father who'd do anything to protect his son. A man who understood how to fight the system from the inside. Someone who'd been tested and come out stronger. Someone who knew that sometimes the only way to stop bad people was to be willing to get your hands dirty in ways they never expected. The next morning, I called Jeffrey McLean. About that case, I said. I'm in. You sure? This could get complicated. The judge involved has connections. The mother has family money. I'm sure. Doug Winters and his kids deserve someone in their corner. Someone who knows how to fight. All right. Come by the office Monday. We'll go over everything. One condition, I added. My son comes first. Always. If I have to choose between a case and Ethan, I choose Ethan. Understood. That's actually why you're perfect for this. You understand what's at stake better than anyone. After I hung up, I made breakfast for Ethan. Pancakes, his favorite. He came stumbling out of his room, still half asleep, his hair sticking up in every direction. Morning, buddy. Morning. He climbed onto a stool at the counter. Can we go to the climbing gym today? Sure. But first I need to tell you something. I set a plate in front of him. I'm going to be helping some people who are having problems. Problems kind of like what we went through. His eyes widened. With bad judges? Sometimes. Other times with different kinds of bad people. But always people who are hurting kids or families. Are you going to be a detective? Something like that. I'll be working with Mr. McLean, the lawyer who helped us. Doing investigations, finding evidence, helping people who can't get help other ways. Ethan thought about this while chewing his pancake. Then, will it be dangerous? Sometimes. But I'll be careful. And you'll always be my first priority. Nothing is more important than you. Good. He took another bite. 'Cause you're the best dad ever. Other kids should have dads like you. My throat tightened. I'll do my best to help them. We spent the day at the climbing gym. Ethan was getting better. He made it 3/4 of the way up the wall before his arms gave out. I spotted him from below, ready to catch him if he fell, but he didn't fall. He carefully climbed back down and tried again. That's what we both were doing, I realized. Climbing back from the fall, trying again, getting stronger each time. On Monday, I went to McLean's office and reviewed the Winters case. It was worse than I'd thought. The mother, Misty Hendricks, had a long history of instability, 3 prior marriages, restraining orders filed against her by previous partners, allegations of substance abuse. But she also had money and family connections. Doug Winters, on the other hand, was a mechanic with a DUI from when he was 25 and not much else. He'd been trying for 2 years to get custody of his kids, ages 9 and 6. The kids had told their school counselor about bruises, about being locked in their rooms as punishment, about their mother's erratic behavior. But Judge Eric Rowe, an old golfing buddy of Misty's father, kept ruling in her favor. Same pattern, McLean said. Power protecting power. The vulnerable getting crushed. What's our entry point? I've filed for an emergency custody hearing based on new evidence. The school counselor's reports that Rowe ignored. But I need someone to investigate Misty's current situation. Document what's really happening. Find evidence strong enough that even Rowe can't ignore it. You need someone who can work outside the lines. Exactly. He handed me a file. Everything we have so far. Names, addresses, financial records. Think you can find what we need? I opened the file and scanned the contents. Already patterns were emerging. Inconsistencies in Misty's story, gaps in the court records, connections that shouldn't exist. Yeah, I said. I can find it. Over the next few weeks, I fell back into old rhythms. Surveillance, interviews, research. Following paper trails and digital footprints. Talking to people who'd been afraid to speak up before. Teachers, neighbors, ex-husbands. Building a picture of who Misty Hendricks really was versus who she pretended to be in court. The evidence was damning. Current substance abuse, violent outbursts, neglect of her children's basic needs. I documented everything, built an airtight case. But I also found something else. Judge Rowe wasn't just biased, he was being paid. Misty's father had directed substantial campaign contributions to Rowe's last retention election. There were also personal loans, business deals, connections that constituted clear conflicts of interest. I gave it all to McLean. He filed for Rowe's recusal and got it. The case was transferred to a different judge, and within 2 weeks, Doug Winters had full custody of his kids. The day after the ruling, Doug came to McLean's office to thank us. He broke down crying when he saw me, not from sadness, but from relief so overwhelming he couldn't contain it. I thought I'd lost them, he said. I thought the system was going to let her keep hurting them, and I couldn't do anything. You did the most important thing, I told him. You didn't give up. You kept fighting. Because of you. You found what I couldn't find. You knew how to fight back. After he left, McLean looked at me thoughtfully. You're good at this. Really good. Better than anyone I've worked with. I've had practice. What you did with Winters, it's not just investigation. It's something more. You see the whole picture. How everything connects. How to find the pressure points. It's what I was trained to do. He leaned back in his chair. I want to offer you something. A permanent position. You'd work investigations for cases like this. Abused kids, corrupt officials, systems that fail the people they're supposed to protect. I'd handle the legal side. You'd handle everything else. Everything else meaning the parts that might not be strictly legal. Let's call it creative investigation. Within bounds that protect the people we're helping. I thought about it. About Ethan. About the life we were building. About whether I could do this work without losing myself in it the way I had before. But I also thought about Doug Winters' kids, now safe with their father. About Alicia Avery, finding her voice. About Damon Zimmerman, getting a real chance at rebuilding his life. Part-time, I said finally. I need to be there for Ethan. He comes first. Of course. We'll work around your schedule. And I have full discretion on methods. You don't ask, I don't tell. Understood. We shook on it. That night, I told Ethan about the job. He was excited, proud that his dad was helping people. He didn't need to know the details of how, just that I was using my skills to protect kids like him. Does this mean you're like a superhero? He asked. I laughed. No, buddy. I'm just a guy who knows how to find information and help people use it. That's what superheroes do. They help people. Maybe he was right. Maybe being a superhero didn't mean having powers or wearing a cape. Maybe it just meant standing up when others wouldn't. Fighting back when the system failed. Protecting the vulnerable from the powerful. I thought about Charles Hand, sitting in prison, his empire of corruption destroyed. About Rodney McFarland, facing his own criminal charges. About Lorena, living alone now with the knowledge of what she'd enabled. They'd all thought they were untouchable. They'd all learned otherwise. And there were more like them out there. More corrupt judges, more abusive officials, more systems that needed to be torn down and rebuilt. More Charles Hands waiting to hurt more kids. But there were also more people like me. People who'd been victims, who'd fought back, who knew how the system really worked and how to beat it. The difference was, I knew how to fight in ways they didn't expect. I knew how to be patient, methodical, ruthless when necessary. I knew how to turn their power against them. And now I had a new purpose. Not just protecting my own son, but helping other fathers, other mothers, other families who'd been failed by the people who were supposed to help them. Jeffrey McLean called it creative investigation. I called it justice. 6 months later, I'd helped with 8 more cases. Some went smoothly. Evidence was found. Bad actors were exposed. Victims got protection. Others were harder, required more creative solutions, pushed boundaries further than I'd have liked. But in every case, the outcome was the same. People who'd been hurt found safety, and people who'd been abusing power faced consequences. Word spread quietly, not through advertising or publicity, but through the network of people we'd helped. A father in the next county overheard about Doug Winters and called. A teacher whose student was being abused heard about my work with Ethan and reached out. Each case led to another, like dominoes falling. And with each case, I got better, more efficient, more effective. The skills from my old life at Meridian came back fully, sharpened by new purpose. I wasn't just finding secrets anymore. I was using them to protect people who needed protection. Ethan thrived. Therapy helped. Time helped. But more than anything, knowing he was safe helped. Knowing his father had fought for him and won helped. He was still just a kid, but he was becoming a stronger kid. More confident. Less afraid. Sometimes he'd ask about the cases I was working on. I'd tell him what I could, always framed as helping families in trouble. He seemed to understand that some things had to stay confidential, that privacy mattered. When I grow up, he said one night before bed, I want to help people like you do. You can be anything you want, buddy. But I want to be like you. Because you're brave and you fight for people. I tucked him in, kissed his forehead. You're already braver than me. You told the truth when it was scary. You stood up to people who try to hurt you. That's real courage. After he fell asleep, I sat in the living room and thought about how different life had become from where it had been a year ago. Back then, I'd been trying so hard to be normal, to fit into a safe, predictable existence. I'd buried who I really was because I thought that was what being a good father meant. Turned out being a good father meant being willing to become whoever you needed to be to protect your child. Even if that meant embracing the parts of yourself you tried to leave behind. My phone buzzed. Another message from McLean. Big case. Senator's daughter claiming her father abused her. Nobody will investigate because of who he is. Interested, I typed back immediately. Send me everything you have. Because this was who I was now. Not Troy Morrison, the covert investigator. Not Troy Blevins, the retail manager. Something new, forged in the fire of protecting my son from Charles' hand. I was the person who stood between powerful predators and vulnerable victims. The person who knew how to fight dirty when clean fighting wouldn't work. The person who understood that sometimes you had to be ruthless to achieve justice. And I was damn good at it. Outside my window, the city stretched out into darkness. Thousands of lives being lived, thousands of stories unfolding. Some of those stories had happy endings. Some didn't. But for the ones that needed a different ending, for the families trapped by corruption and abuse, for the children suffering while systems failed them, for them, I'd be there. Ready to fight. Ready to win. Because I'd learned the most important lesson of all. Power doesn't protect you from consequences. It just delays them until someone like me comes along. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.